When Donald Trump was held in contempt last month for failing to comply with a civil lawsuit subpoena, it seemed like there might be some consequences for the former president. That is, until almost immediately ending further enforcement of the order, despite Trump's continued noncompliance. It's a cycle we've seen over and over again through Trump's political career, and even before, with seemingly zero legal or political fallout for anything he does, as he once boasted would happen.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
Of course, when his words and actions helped lead to an attempted coup, things got a lot more concerning, not just for the here and now, but the future of our democracy. That issue is at the heart of a Boston Globe editorial series published last summer called Future-Proofing the Presidency, which made the case for breaking with 2 centuries of tradition to criminally prosecute the former president. And earlier this month, the man behind that series, Abdallah Fayyed, was named a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for that work. He joins me now. That series, I should also note, was co-edited by Deputy Editorial Editor Alan Wizbicki. Did I get that right, I hope, Abdallah? I did.
That's right. And Alan Wizbicki, and editorial page editor
Bina Venkatraman. Great. First, congratulations. We're really happy for you, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks very much, Jim. I really appreciate it, and thanks for inviting me on.
My pleasure. You didn't just say that Trump could and should be prosecuted. You also say his behavior exposed a lot of weaknesses in our democratic institutions and proposed reforms to address them. Highlight 2 or 3 of the weaknesses that you addressed, and we'll talk about the reforms in a minute or two.
Well, to be clear, the reason we wrote this series was because the Trump presidency was an incredibly dangerous stress test on our institutions. And quite frankly, our institutions failed, and we're continuing to see them fail. And so we wrote this to lay out a number of recommendations, a number of steps, for our government to take, from Congress to the Department of Justice to the Biden administration more broadly, in order to prevent the rise of the next American tyrant or the next Donald Trump. And so we asked Congress, for example, to revamp our nepotism laws so that we don't employ people like Jared Kushner, a real estate businessman who has no experience in foreign policy, to negotiate Middle East peace deals or broker deals in the Middle East. That Jared Kushner, who has no history or background in medicine, doesn't oversee our COVID task force in the middle of a pandemic. So that's an urgent reform. We also ask for whistleblower protections so that we can encourage civil servants to blow the whistle when they see something really dangerous and autocratic going on in the White House. We ask the Department of Justice to revisit its legal memo and its policy that it will not indict a sitting president. We understand the reservation that you don't want to prosecute a sitting president because that would be a circus and then you can't really govern the country. But you can indict a sitting president and then prosecute him after he leaves office. There is nothing in the Constitution about that. We ask the Department of Justice to revisit that in order to show future presidents that there will be consequences to breaking the law in the Oval Office, particularly if you're trying to usurp American democracy and overturn an election.
You know, Abdallah, by my account, and this is not a reflection on you, not one single reform that's mentioned in your terrific series has been enacted. Is that by your count as well?
I think that's correct. We have not seen Congress install any new guardrails. The Department of Justice, has made some adjustments, small adjustments here and there, but no major new guardrails have been installed to protect us from somebody like Donald Trump occupying the Oval Office.
And also, when you mentioned Congress, you also mentioned the Office of Legal Counsel a couple of minutes ago, which issued this memorandum years ago saying don't prosecute a president. That's not law. It has no force of law. It is purely guidance, which the Department of Justice has chosen to follow, but that could be changed in a second and withdrawn should they choose to do so. That doesn't require 60 votes in the United States Senate, correct?
That's exactly right, Jim. I mean, this is just a policy that the Department of Justice has taken because of that legal memo that you mentioned. And when Robert Mueller started his investigation, he operated under that guideline. That's why we didn't have any conclusions, explicit conclusions, come out of the Robert Mueller report. And that's why Trump waved it around as though it was an exoneration. It was not. Mueller specifically said that he wrote the report to preserve the evidence in case prosecutors ever want to look at it after Donald Trump left office. But he was operating under that guideline that he cannot indict a sitting president. But as you say, there's nothing in the Constitution about that. There is no law about that at all. That is just a norm that the Department of Justice has been operating under for the last 40 or so years.
Yeah, I don't want to be just my usual negative self for the whole half hour. I mean, one area where there may have been some progress, we'll begin to find out on June 9th, is you also spoke to lack of effective congressional oversight. At least so far, it appears that other than a reform which would have allowed the subpoenas to be dealt with, or the violation of the subpoenas, the ignoring of the subpoenas, to be addressed more expeditiously by the court, another reform you proposed, the January 6th committee seems to be taking oversight really seriously, much more seriously than Congress did during Trump's 4 years in office. Would you not agree?
I do agree with that. And the January 6th committee has been doing some very important work. You know, unfortunately, the January 6th committee cannot itself hold people accountable. Yeah. But what it can do is it can show the public, especially through these public hearings that we'll see next month, it can show the public the evidence that has been accruing over these last 6 months as to what went wrong, how it went wrong, who was plotting to break the law, people's intentions. And that hopefully will create the kind of public pressure that is required to inspire our leaders to act, to inspire people in Congress to pass laws, and to put pressure on the DOJ that this is not something that they should let go of.
You know, when you're talking about Congress for a second, the reason I am as without hope as I could possibly be on almost everything on your list, the one thing where there was theoretically going to be bipartisan support, it was going to whisk through, was this Electoral Reform Act, which was going to do nothing more than raise the threshold for a challenge to the electoral votes from a few to a higher number, and much more importantly, make clear what everybody knows, except Donald Trump and his sycophants know is true, is that the vice president's role is purely ministerial rather than discretionary in terms of the vote counting, and that's going nowhere despite initially a lot of electoral support. You know, in terms of the prosecution thing, we don't even know if the Department of Justice itself is even investigating this thing. There's been terrific op-eds in your paper, the Larry Tribes of the world, et cetera, who have argued that it appears they're not. We know the grand jury in Manhattan has dissolved. It seems the only thing that is pending as of the moment, at least as far as I can tell, unless something quietly is going on in the Justice Department in Washington, is this Georgia grand jury looking into the, to me, the clearest on its face violation of criminal law on the part of Donald Trump. But that's it on the criminal front. Is it not, Abdallah?
Well, ultimately, we don't actually know what the DOJ is looking into because they don't comment on ongoing investigations.
Yeah, it's true.
There is a chance that they are investigating the former president. There is a chance that they might be preparing a case against the former president. We don't know. But we do know that there is movement in Georgia, and that, as you said, was a clear violation of the law. And we'll see where that goes. But as we mentioned in the series, the reason the Georgia case in particular is important, the reason that the potential DOJ investigations are important and the January 6th committee is important, is because we believe that it's critical for Donald Trump to be not just held accountable for anything, but to be held accountable for the crimes that he committed specifically in the Oval Office. So his financial crimes before he was president, of course, it's important to hold anybody who commits fraud or financial crimes accountable for committing those crimes. But for Trump, it's to send a message to future presidents, to future administrations and their staff that there actually will be consequences to breaking the law in the Oval Office.
But if I may, we only have a minute left. I would argue the message in terms of consequences is not only are there none for embracing lawlessness, there are rewards. You know what happened last night. Those who embraced the lawlessness and the big lie of the Trump campaign were the most successful in Republican primaries. And the cherry on the sundae, I don't know if you saw this on Truth Social, the former president himself, I was going to say tweets, truths, whatever the verb is. Here's what he said. Dr. Oz should declare victory, even though it's a dead heat. It makes it much harder for them to cheat with the ballots that they, quote, just happen to find. So essentially, the moral of last night's story was embrace the worst of Donald Trump and you have the best shot of becoming a Republican office holder. Wasn't that what we learned last night?
That's exactly the problem that this series is trying to solve, and that is to show that there actually are consequences. And right now, I hope that leaders are treating this with the urgency that it requires, but there really is an urgency that I feel like is lacking with a lot of leaders in Washington. Yeah. I hope that I'm wrong, but the reason we wrote this series is to show Republicans, to show people in office and potential Democrats in office who might be in the Oval Office at some future date who want to be corrupt, to show that there are consequences to breaking the law and being so lawless. That's ultimately the point of the series. That's why we hope that people actually take it upon themselves to impose the law, because then the message that they're sending to future holders of the office is essentially what you're saying, that you can get away with anything.
Yeah. Well, Abdallah Fayyed, I hope what you wrote brilliantly is a template for reform, and thanks for doing it. And again, congratulations.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks very much.